Hey folks, Mark here. Let's start out with the fact that I blew a tooth. I lost a tooth, and it's kind of affecting how I talk, so it's going to be a little weird. But I want to talk about the way that people are targeted. Now, not just by predators, but also bullies. Um, or like getting into conflicts. How do we get chosen to be targeted, right? And it's not what you think. And to do this, we're going to start with Roy Miller's social versus asocial violence. Now, a lot of people fixate on asocial violence. Ooh, resource predation, process predators. Ooh. Well, in fact, most conflict, most bullying, most of this stuff is in fact social. So that's a much bigger target than these. Now, something else that a couple of points that Roy and I disagreed over is that in their development, people can go to a point where they go one way or the other, social or asocial. But there's kind of a lot of overlap in the earlier stages, and that is something where you will not be dealing with pure one or the other, but very rarely. But when you do, it's kind of obvious. What can be confusing is you'll look at something and it's go, it's mostly about this, but it's some of this too. So to understand that, we need to separate them, understand each one of them, and then look at how much of a Venn diagram they are creating. So, social violence arises because we are social primates. That means we are designed as humans to exist in groups. Groups have hierarchies. Okay? Now, we're wired to try and get status in these hierarchies that we belong to. And when we are in a group, that is our safety, that is our survival. Well, something that has happened is in the changes, it used to be you grew up in a village and or in a clan or in a tribe, and these were all the people you ever saw. So your constant status, etc., it was an ongoing thing. Well, then cities began to come into effect, and it became bigger, but we also still stayed to our neighborhoods. So we sort of worked around it. Well, with advertising, and this may seem like a weird term, but bear with me. In nationalism, we have been trained to think in terms of Uber groups. And another way of thinking about this is like, yeah, we're a nation, we're, this group or that group, we're an identity group, but we don't know everybody in the group. It's too big. But a side effect of that is that we end up taking all the things that we've used and were evolutionarily designed to achieve status with in a small group, and we've applied it to an imaginary group. It's big. Okay? This is really where things can start going wobbly. Because are we actually seeking status in a group, or are we trying to get status in an imaginary group? Okay? And if you don't recognize the difference, you can really run into some problems. Namely, when somebody is thinking that if they don't stand up for themselves, they don't do this, they'll be thought of as a pussy in a room full of strangers. And this is really out of the blue aggression. I mean, seriously, huh? What's going on? unless you're caught up in it too, whereupon it both makes perfect sense because you have to stand up, right? Well, that isn't really sane making. I mean, it really tends to make us a little insane. And before we go any further, humans are amazingly nonviolent animals. Now, by that, I mean we do not kill or fight each other, right? Our food has been industrialized and processed. We don't have to do it. We have very little experience with the real thing. But mostly, we try and avoid killing other humans. Now, there's a switch in our brains that will go off, and, all of a sudden you have group warfare, which is a totally different subject. But individually, we're really nonviolent. Having said that, we're really bad about threatening violence. Now, I don't mean that, we do it badly. Excuse me, I'm going to kick your ass. No. I mean, we're bad at doing it a lot. I mean, even a mom look. When mom gives you that look of like, knock it off, you're being threatened with violence. Thing is, actual violence is way less effective than the threat of violence. Because violence comes with instructions how to avoid it. And most of the time, like 90 to 95% of the time, those are legitimate instructions. Okay? Our own egos get involved and say, well, no, I'm not going to do that. Or, what if it's not real? Well, guess what? With actual processed predators who are enjoying the process of torturing, and violence is the goal, a lot of time those instructions will be lies. Mostly, though, violence comes with instructions how to avoid it. They'll tell you how not to get your ass kicked. Okay? So, when you're talking about how do people target those who do it, there's a lot of reasons why we can get into an aggressive and hostile conflict and situation. We can do it over resources. We can do it over territory. We can do it over status, which, oddly enough, we're more interested in maintaining our status than gaining it. Okay? That's an important thing because the guy is not going to get upset about, somebody being higher than he is. What he's going to get upset about is if you disrespect him. Okay? So there's that. There's self-worth, which is, again, this, you insulted me. There's breaking the rules. And then there's something a lot of people don't want to talk about, and that is violence can be fun. Okay? A group of people getting together just having a grand time beating the hell out of somebody. Well, all of these things factor into the topics we're going to be talking about here. But what I want to cover now is a couple of more points regarding the limits of violence. And that is, not only do you get in trouble for it, and even the bad guys know this, which has a lot to do with how they rob people, but you can also get hurt. It's dangerous. If somebody is like too big of a fighter, too big of a threat, a counter threat, messing with them, fuck around and find out. Okay? These are limits. Okay? And they will have a whole lot to do with who people will pick on, who they will target. And one of the things, or actually two things about this are, number one, they're looking for weakness. Okay? Can they get away with it? Is it safe for them to do this? The other thing, and this is related but not quite the same, is, are they in circumstances where they can do it and not suffer consequences? Now, this is an exception. This is somebody who will go out of their way against somebody and get in somebody's face who actually could tear them apart, but they know that person cannot act. So Weakness is it's safe for me to attack this person. And you'll find this is very, very consistent in a whole lot of situations. Versus, is the person that you're targeting incapable of defending themselves because of restrictions? Okay, that's a big one. So, those are some foundations that I wanted to cover because they're going to come back again and again and again in this series. So, it's before Thanksgiving. Have yourself a happy Thanksgiving, and I will see you next week.